Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome to this last of the Sunday afternoon talks for 2017. October has come already, and so the theme for this afternoon's talk is the blue pill or the red pill. Why wake up when my habits are so pleasant? So for some of you that will be a very obscure title. For others who've seen the film The Matrix, or at least heard of it, then that will make a bit more sense. In this science fiction film of a number of years ago called The Matrix, the plot revolves around a hero who's called Neo, discovering that rather than life being say a situation of free will and independence and enjoyment, that the discovery is that that's just the appearance of things, and so that he discovers that the life that he thinks he's leading is an illusion, and that in fact his body is kept in a little kind of plastic pod. Like all other human beings, are all in little plastic pods, suspended in fluid, surrounded by pipes and wires, and the mental energy that they produce in their little flotation tank is what's powering the great artificial intelligence that's now running the planet. But the Matrix is the computer program that runs and to organize the collective illusion. So all of us living beings who are in their little flotation tanks, they all assume they are driving to work and chatting with their family and having breakfast and going to the library meeting and having a good old time. And life is comfortable, predictable, and reliably pleasant. So that it becomes revealed to the hero along the way that this is an illusion, and then the mentor, whose name is Morpheus, then presents the hero Neo with a choice: so the blue pill and the red pill. If you take the blue pill, it means your mind will continue to be absorbed in the delusion. You'll carry on somewhat happily with your delusion of having free will, being able to walk around, do your thing, and live your life in its deluded state. If you take the red pill, you'll wake up to what's actually been happening. So then, not to spoil the film for everybody, but I'll tell you. So he takes the red pill and then realizes, oh my goodness, I spent my whole life in this little flotation tank. I've never actually been anywhere. I'm just sort of suspended in fluids, surrounded by wires, and the whole of my life, the idea of being an independent person, making choices, and doing what I like, has been totally delusory. It's all been an illusion. So this has become a sort of a metaphor in our culture of: do you take the blue pill and stay asleep, or do you take the red pill? There's this very impactful moment. I haven't seen the film for a long, long time. I think I last saw it when I was still living in the USA. At one of our monastery film nights. Once a year we'd have a film night. Dhammically informative films for the community. So the Matrix is one of those, like Star Wars is considered filled with all sorts of useful and symbolic meaning. And so when the hero wakes up from the delusion, it kind of breaks free of the influence of the matrix, and then if I'm remembering correctly, his mentor introduces him to the world as it actually is. It's pretty grim. Even if he's outside the flotation tank, it's still a kind of desolate, post-apocalyptic world run by an artificial intelligence. So it's pretty nasty. And then his mentor, there's of course this little enclave, little group of noble warriors who are sort of battling the evil empire of the artificial intelligence. They're trying to, say, be the torch bearers for freedom. But his mentor, at that moment of him waking up to where he is and how life actually is, his mentor says to him, "Welcome to the desert of the real." Welcome, not the dessert. One S, not two. Welcome to the desert of the real. So it's a bit of a shock, but it's also reality. So it's I feel there's a useful message in this, and the question that's there in the title of the talk: blue pill or red pill? Do we want to carry on in our deluded state based on our habits of self-view and our opinions, our preferences, our familiar way of seeing ourselves in the world, or do we want to wake up? Do we want to try out through the eyes, seeing eyes through the life through the eyes of Dhamma, to make our way through the desert of the real? So I feel this is a kind of question that many of us face during the course of a day. Do I choose to buy into my self-centered views, my opinions, my habits, or do I choose to take a different perspective? Do I choose to let go of those? You know, the Buddha said, as I often quote, the Buddha said, when he's talking about the world, what is the world? That in the world whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is the world in this Dhamma and discipline. So the world is, in this respect, is not, say, the planet or the physical universe so much as our perception of the world. So, and as he points out in that teaching, what is it whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. That is the means whereby one is a perceiver of the world, a conceiver of the world. So the world is the world of our own experience. So if you've got a really effective blue pill, then you can stay completely wrapped in your little bubble of your own rightness, your own preferences, your own opinions, and that's what we try to do. We try to surround ourselves and sustain the world according to our own preferences, so that we're always comfortable, we're always, protected, we're always fully supplied with all the things that we like, with the people that we like. We never have to deal with anything difficult or unwanted, which of course is kind of impossible, but we keep trying for that. We keep trying to set our life up so that we'll have never have any difficult or painful situations. We'll never have to be with any problematic or unpleasant people. We'll never have to deal with pain or loss or any of our faculties disappearing. That we'll be able to see, hear, and smell, taste, touch, think completely as we would wish to, completely smoothly and accurately. We'll never have any unwanted emotions like worry or fear or anger. We'll always be, living in a completely clear, benign, happy state. We wish. So that's the kind of dream of the blue pill. So we, as is in the title of the talk, why wake up when my habits are so pleasant? You know, as long as those habits can be fed, as long as we've got a good supply of our drug of choice, whether it's social approval, whether it's interesting TV programs, whether it's perfect medical treatment, whether it's alcohol or prescription drugs that make us feel comfortable all the time, whatever it might be, whether it's a socially approved of drug or or not approved of, as long that's what so much of our life and our society is based upon, is sort of keeping the supply of say blue pills, so that we'll be able to sustain that illusion of comfortable, independent, free existence, to make us feel content and happy all the time. So that looking at this, reflecting on this theme, the ways that we habitually, or as a culture, as a society, I'm not making any judgments about anybody here. Probably this is the kind of people who come and spend a Sunday afternoon at a Buddhist monastery are probably the more restrained and abstemious end of society. We're not all at the pub, or the boxing matches, or the football, or in the drug dens. But the way we choose to say keep the mind in a say self-centered bubble. We say feed ourselves with distractions, so television, films, music, the internet, just a constant stream of things that we like, things that are interesting, things that are, say, captivating our attention. So we seek distraction. Drugs and alcohol. Many of us have spent a lot of time drinking and using drugs to sort of, as they say, as mood adjusters, adjusting our mood so that we feel good, quote unquote, feeling good, and so that the amount of time we spend, say, getting drunk enough, or have enough painkillers or tranquilizers or antidepressants that just make us feel comfortable, good, alert, enough. It's a huge industry. I'm not making fun of anyone's mental illnesses at all, but just recognizing this is how we are as a culture, that we spend a lot of time and effort and money consuming things to bring that kind of sense of at least temporary contentment and happiness and well-being. So we drugs and alcohol, distraction. We like to believe in our opinions. We like to absorb into our own ideas, and often say believing in my worldview and absorbing into how I see things, and then criticizing others who think differently. That's also a very major occupation, is the way we keep our bubble really, tightly enclosed. My rightness, and then how many of us, either ourselves or at least people in our family or amongst our friends or people that we work with, that we're around people who continually criticize the world, praising this, criticizing that, sort of making a kind of fence, forming that bubble of their own feelings of rightness, judging the world. This is good, that's bad, this is right, that's wrong, I approve of this, I disapprove of that. So we absorb into our opinions. Also related to that is our reason. We come up with explanations of why we feel what we do. We kind of get a sense of comfort or reassurance through being able to explain everything, telling ourselves, this is why I feel this is why I feel that. We use our intellect to create that environment of comfort, or try to. So the problem is that, at least in my experience, is none of this really works. And that you can never quite take enough of the drug, you can never quite drink enough to feel perfectly good all the time. And then it becomes socially unacceptable, or you're not allowed to drive, or you cause accidents, or people, your friends tell you, why are you drinking so much? Yeah. And I've had this experience myself many years ago, when at a Tuesday lunchtime at the local pub, just the three of us, only three of us in the pub. This was before I was. I should add that. This was, I think this was the spring of 1977, around then. And there was only three of us in the pub, and this friend of mine, who was quite the party animal. She was by far the most sort of extreme extrovert and unrestrained character in our local area. She's actually the one who pierced my ear many years ago. So she was introducing me to this friend of hers, and who was an engineer, and we were having this fascinating conversation about him and a friend of his who he'd known for a long time, who lived as a hermit up in the hills in the north of England. And about an hour and a half into this conversation, this friend of mine said, "Why are you drinking so much?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you're on your 8th pint." And it's only 12 o'clock. We're just the three of us. It's not like we're in the middle of a party. Why are you drinking so much? "Because I want to." Yeah, I feel like it. And then she just said to me, "What are you afraid of?" And that really hit me, because of course I took refuge in explaining, self-justification, but it was a wake-up call for me, in a way. Again, in the theme of today's talk, that I had become unconscious of how I was just drinking all the time to make myself feel okay, even when the situation didn't really call for it. There's just 3 of us in a pub, and it wasn't even noon. And I was already on my 8th pint. It's a true story. So we get the feedback from the people around us, or that we can't drink enough to feel good. We can't stay distracted enough. We get bored. We spend so many hours looking at websites on the internet, or so many hours watching TV. So many. How many cruises can you go on? How many holidays? How many home improvements can you make? Until it just changed the curtains 4 times this year already. I'm still not happy. We're on our 5th cruise, and it's still only August. Where next? And something gets bored, gets tired, can't be satisfied. You can't get to that good place. It's not sustainable. So this is something that is really worthy of consideration. So mostly what we try and do is up the consumption of the blue pills. Well, I'm not trying hard enough. I need a bigger TV. That's right. It's not the programs. It's I need a bigger screen. I need better sound system. I need more I need faster broadband. If it was just had a higher speed internet, then I'd be fine. I'd be happy. But we keep increasing the dose. We keep increasing the consumption, and it's never quite enough. Many years ago, I did a university degree in physiology and psychology, and one of the books that we studied is called The Physiology of Excitable Cells, which might sound very interesting, but it was a really challengingly boring book. But it was the content was really very, very interesting, because an excitable cell is like the cells of the eye or the ear, the tongue, the nose, the cells of the senses that produce an electric current that can be stimulated. So the cells in the ear that help enable us to hear, or the cells in the eye, like the rods and the cones in the eye that enable us to see. So an excitable cell, when light hits the cells at the back of the eye, they produce an electric current, and that goes down the optic nerve. Well, if you have a bright light, I'm sure there's a few doctors here who'll correct me, but never mind. If a bright light, the initial impact of that bright light landing on those cells, it sends a big charge. But then the excitable cell adjusts, so that a bright light, first of all, will send a big charge down the nerve, but then the cell adjusts, because if the light stays strong, it says, okay, we don't need to keep sending us such a strong signal, and it adjusts. So that brightness becomes ordinary. So no matter how strong the signal gets, the system will keep adjusting to make it ordinary, to make it normal, so that the stronger the taste, the louder the noise, the more variety there is in the flavor, no matter how strong or varied or intense or impactful it is, the system will always adjust to make it ordinary. So our neurophysiology is rigged for us to be bored. So that change is what is interesting. So then similarly, the cell will keep adjusting until it gets such a strong stimulus that it'll actually break down. Like the light is too bright, it'll just destroy the cell. Or it goes down to the lower limit, the more and more subtle stimulus, until it's below the level of any impact being made. So our whole system keeps adjusting so that anything that we experience through the senses eventually becomes ordinary. So that's why we get bored. So when we experience this, our first reaction is maybe just to get a bigger screen, or go to a different pub, or to find a different partner, go to a different Ajahn. Replay the Sunday talks that you really enjoyed, so you can go back and live them again. I'm not making fun of that. I mean, this is what we do. We just keep going back to the same stimulation to get that feeling once more. So we can do that, but then there's also that feeling in the heart of being dissatisfied. It's not quite enough. It's not quite right. It's not quite there. I'm not quite free. I'm not quite content. And again, going back to my sort of partying days before I was a monk, I used to feel I was reflecting on this, thinking about this talk, and I was reflecting how when I was a teenager, I used to feel really jealous of the friends of mine who could get really completely lost in their moods or their feelings. They could get really happily carried away. And I used to feel, I wish I could just sort of switch off like them. Why do I keep thinking about things all the time? I would see that in the middle of some kind of party or some kind of adventure, I say, well, why is this interesting? Or why are we doing this? Or what's the point of this? And which was a question arising in my mind, like, well, why do we spend time doing this? Or why is this supposed to be fun? And then my friends would look at me like, idiot, or what kind of a moron are you? Or get another round in, buy another round and just keep going. And that would be the response. But I used to, as I was recollecting this, I used to actually feel jealous. Like, if I could just be kind of brainless like my friends, that would be great. Again, I'm not trying to put them down, but that was the feeling that arose at the time. Like, oh, I wish I could just be sort of wonderfully insensitive as my dear mates. Not all of them, but some of them. Because my mind kept asking these kind of questions, like, well, why isn't this enough? Or why do we keep having to do more? Or why is there always this hungering? So this is, in a way, brings us to the question of why wake up when our habits are so pleasant? Essentially because that pleasantness is only one kind of happiness. That's one kind of happiness, is getting what you want. That's in whatever kind of dimension. It might be that getting what you want is a Nobel Peace Prize. Very very appropriate, beautiful thing. And so, but what you want might just be to feel content, to feel approved of, to feel happy, to feel comfortable, whatever it might be. So that kind of happiness is the happiness of getting what you want. So it is a kind of happiness, but it's a very shallow kind of happiness. So the Buddha said this is a kind of pleasure, but it's a very coarse kind of pleasure. And there is another kind of happiness that we can experience, which is far superior to that, which is essentially the happiness of not craving anything, the happiness of contentment, the happiness of the heart, free from craving, the heart that is awakened to reality. So that's a very different kind of happiness. There's a significant sutta in the middle-length discourses called the Magandiya Sutta. And the Buddha is talking to this layman called Magandiya. And Magandiya is quite a sensualist. He can't understand this renunciation thing. He likes his food, he likes drink, he likes fine clothes, he enjoys things. He has a love for the sensual world. And so he can't understand why anyone in their right mind would want to give up any kind of sense pleasure. It just doesn't make sense to him. Why would you deny yourself things that are fun, that are enjoyable? And so he's having this dialogue with the Buddha, and the Buddha's a celibate monk. He's a renunciant. You're walking around northeast India barefoot for 45 years. So Magandiya can't understand why would you give up with so much happiness, so much pleasure, when life has got so much to offer? What benefit do you see in that? And then it's a very lovely little dialogue, because the Buddha doesn't sort of put him down or criticize him. He says, Magandhya, so what do you think, Magandhya, if after this lifetime you were reborn in the Tavatimsa heaven, one of the heavenly realms, and you were a Deva prince living in the Nandana Grove, and you had a retinue of 500 beautiful nymphs, celestial maidens that were your harem up in the heavenly realm. And there you are in the Nandana Grove with these 500 dove-footed nymphs. Doesn't mean they had feet like bird's claws, but I think it means sort of delicate and dainty-footed celestial nymphs. So if there you are in the Tavatimsa heaven, a deva with 500 nymphs in your harem, would you be interested in the life that you have here as a human being down in the world? You're living here, running your business and taking care of your family life. Would you be interested in that? Well, no, I wouldn't be interested at all. I mean, up in the Tavatimsa heaven with 500 celestial nymphs to keep me company, well, why would I be interested in worldly happiness when what I can experience in the Tavatimsa heaven is so vastly, immeasurably more pleasant, more delightful, more satisfying? And the Buddha said, so exactly so, Magandhya. It's not that I disregard or dismiss the worldly pleasure as, but in its own right. But I know a pleasure that is so far beyond that. It's as far beyond and above the pleasure of a deva in the Nandana Grove as the pleasure of that deva is above the happiness of worldly life in the human realm. So it's not that I despise that pleasure or I hate it or I fear it. It's just not interesting to me, because I know a pleasure that is far greater, far more profound, far more comprehensive. So it's just not interesting. It's like I got far more channels than you have already. You got one black and white channel on your TV, and I got 500, full color with a 5-foot screen. I'm just elaborating. The Buddha didn't say it. I put it that way. But just using a modern day example, it's like, why would you be jealous of somebody with a small black and white TV with one channel when you've got a TV with 500 channels and a 5-foot screen? It's like, it just wouldn't be interesting, because what you have available to you is far more interesting, far more pleasing, far more satisfying. So this is, in a sense, this is the red pill. This is where we get to the red pill, is how do we discover that kind of happiness that is, say, so much more profound, so much more complete, and essentially the reason why it's so much, so superior is because it's a happiness that's independent of circumstances, where the kind of happiness of getting what you want depends on getting a supply of the things that you like and having the right environment to experience it and having the right people with you or the right physiology. If someone can cook you the most delicious meal of your favorite foods, but if you're feeling sick, they put it on the table in front of you and you go, ooh, it's exactly what you like, it's your favorite things. They did it specially for you, but you take one look and you go, ooh, sorry, I can't even look at it. Just as using a personal story, a few years ago, Ajahn Amaro and I were getting a checkup at Simitiwait Hospital in Bangkok, and they were doing like a full-scale checkup because just as a sort of regular medical review, just to see how we were. And both of us reacted to some of the medicine that they gave us. So we're having the tests through the morning, and then they laid on this meal offering at the hospital, and it was like half the floor was covered with all these kind of delicious foods. They've obviously spent a huge amount of time and care and effort preparing, and literally he couldn't even look at it. I took one look and I had to literally run for the bathroom before I kind of vomit, like projectile vomiting experience. Sorry to disturb everybody, but it was the last time I really threw up. It was in a dramatic way was the smell of and the sight of this glorious and delicious food that was offered with great sincerity and kindness. It's like, literally, I had to run. Monks don't run. Nuns don't either. Monastics, we process. We don't run. But I ran to get to the bathroom before I could have had this projectile vomiting experience. So the deliciousness of the food, or the beauty of the object, or the delightfulness of the sound is dependent. Whereas the kind of happiness that comes from taking the red pill, the happiness that comes from waking up, is of a whole different order. It's not dependent on the senses. It's not dependent on our conditioning. So the means whereby we wake up, or how the Buddha encourages this, is there are many and various ways that he talks about in the scriptures and uses. But a lot of it hinges around breaking ourselves free of the habits that we have of looking for security in, say, what we look like, wanting to be sort of young and attractive, wanting to look, appealing to others, wanting to always be comfortable, wanting to never be sick, never to grow old, never to lose anybody that we love, never to lose anything that we love. So that what he called the 5 subjects for frequent recollection is the most common and accessible way of recognizing those habits. We try to take refuge and depend upon things that are undependable. We take refuge, we try to find security in things which are insecure. We try to find satisfaction in things that cannot satisfy. So, like, for example, I'm not sure of these statistics, but I have heard that the cosmetic industry is a $700 billion a year industry worldwide. $700 billion. Of course, it's only about 500 million pounds. Had 500 billion pounds. Pounds are worth a bit more than dollars, but still, that's a lot of money for cosmetics, for how we look. Just cosmetic surgery, similarly, huge amounts of money are spent to create an impression on others and how we will look. The amount of time and effort and anxiety is spent. Obviously, we look after our bodies and take care of our health in sensible and practical ways. But how many of us spend huge amounts of our day worrying about ailments that we have, ailments that we might have, illnesses and ailments that we have had and worried they're going to come back again, or that we might have in the future? Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't visit doctors or take care of ourselves. I'm very appreciative of what good health I have. But just to consider the amount of anxiety we experience, the amount of time and effort that is spent worrying about illness, trying to avoid it, fearing that it's going to happen, and worrying what certain sensations might mean, and such like. So the 5 subjects for frequent recollection that the Buddha encourages us as individuals to pick up and explore every day are: I am of the nature to age, I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken, I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I'm the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. So, whenever this comes up, I find myself making it a kind of, not exactly a disclaimer, but a reassurance that the Buddha was very compassionate. He was not a sadist. He was not kind of making fun of us or trying to make us feel bad or depressed. Because from a self-centered perspective, say, you're aging, you're gonna get sick and you're gonna die. Ha ha ha. It's not that. that kind of attitude at all. It's a waking up from the delusion, the little bubble of self-view, hoping that we're never going to get old, hoping that we're never going to get sick, hoping that we're never going to die. Like I frequently do this as a little exercise. So just consider for a moment, every single human being in this sala, in this hall, every single one of these bodies is going to die one day. Every single one, 100%. No exceptions. Anyone got any different versions of reality? None of us get off this boat alive. Right? Regardless of how old we are, or how young we are, that's a fact. So why is something in us surprised when we hear that? Again, I'm not reading anybody's mind, but at least if your mind is anything like mine, when I say everybody in this room is going to die, something goes, wait a minute, that can't be quite right. What is it that's saying that can't be right? What is it that's surprised when we get ill? That when we get a cold or we have some kind of illness, what is surprised and feels it shouldn't be this way, or something's gone wrong, or life's being unfair? Isn't it weird that we feel something's gone wrong when the body gets sick? Isn't it? And why do we feel sad when we look in the mirror and there's a few more wrinkles and a few less hairs, or more hairs in the wrong places? You know, what feels wrong about that? Why is that saddening? Isn't that strange? Because the conditioning is from self-view is I have the right to never get old, never get sick, and never die. That's the delusion of self-view. That's like a childlike attitude. And all the things that are mine, none of them should ever leave unless I want to get rid of them. And then they should be gone now. You know, if things are mine, they should stay mine, always, and be exactly the way I like them. That's the way it should be. That's a kind of 5-year-old child's, or maybe a 3-year-old, 3-year-old child's vision of the world. But yet it affects us, even us as sort of supposedly mature adults. But I would say that's the effect of the blue pill, you know, the kind of bubble of self-view that creates that, and is desperately trying to make it so that I never lose anything that I love. All the things that are mine, I keep. I don't get old, I don't get sick, I don't die. You know, if we look at the advertisements, unless it's an advertisement for a retirement plan or a stair lift, you know, everybody in the adverts is 23 and cheerful and good looking. Yeah. Even the advertisements for funeral, for like undertakers, you know, the coffins look really smart, you know. Whereas Ajahn Sucitto pointed out that even when you're in your coffin, you get dressed up as if you're going to a dance. You know, they put you in a dress or a suit that you never would have worn while you were alive. But people quite often, they really look much better in the coffin than they ever did in real life. That's pretty weird. It's pretty weird. So when we have people lying in the chapel of rest here, when the people ask for their bodies to be kept after they've died, to be kept in the temple, then we have no refrigeration. Just the windows. You know, we open the windows, but the bodies change according to their nature. So that you know, if you die and your body is there in the chapel of rest for 5 days or a week, then it becomes a food source for the other creatures, and mold and the organic nature of change of a human body is going to be taking place. It's not sort of preserved or frozen into an idealized form. So these reflections are the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. These help us to challenge that the habits of imprisoning ourselves, because it's really it's nobody but us as individuals who are keeping us in that bubble. We don't have to stay in that bubble, and that once we recognize, yes, it's good to wake up, and yes, it's good to break free of the bubble, then when we hear those words, I'm of the nature to age, I'm of the nature to sick, and I'm of the nature to die, that is challenging to our self-view. That in the mind that goes, in your mind, when I said, we're all going to, everyone in this hall, these bodies are all going to die one day, that which says, but, can we negotiate? let's talk about that. Yeah. It's important to recognize, the habits of self-view are daunted. Right? Welcome to the desert of the real. It's a desert. It's a desert to the ego. It's not what the ego wants to hear. You're getting older. Yeah, you're getting more wrinkles. Everything is heading south. In my experience, unless you're still growing. There's a few smaller ones here that are not finished their growing yet. But eventually, even those who are small now, everything will head south. That when we are, able to recognize that, that's painful to the ego, but it's simultaneously freeing to the heart. That as long as our view is based on I and me and mine, then we're setting ourselves up for loss and depression and sadness when those changes occur, when things that we love go. But if instead we take refuge in wisdom, that the refuge is in Dhamma, in reality, in nature, rather than in self-view, then as those changes occur, then we're ready for them. It's like, oh, there goes another one. I used to be able to remember people's names, and now his name is, it'll come to me. It's gone. We can't remember where we put our shoes. Mine are by that door over there. I remember that much. I came in that door, right? We can't remember people's names. Things erode. If we are wise and we recognize, oh, there goes another one. And it's not experienced as a sense of diminution. We're not diminished. As it says in an old poem, when were you ever made any the less by dying? When were you ever made any the less by dying? Things come, things go. What's that got to do with anything fundamentally real? So that when the heart meets the experience of change and uncertainty, then it experiences freedom. The experience is one of freedom and wonderment, rather than fear. In one of the Upanishads, I think it's the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, begins with a little passage where, roughly, it says something like, originally there was the mind of the Absolute filling the infinite void. And in the mind of the Absolute there arose the thought, I am. With the thought, I am, there arose fear. And with fear there arose desire. So that's cast in a kind of mythological language, But it's also talking about our experience, this mind of ours. When the I am arises in our mind, if there's me, this is mine, then there's the other. There's that outside, and then there's a sense of me here, the world out there, and then there's a sense of threat. And how do we fend off that feeling of threat or danger or insecurity? Is we get stuff. We desire, the mind goes to desire to protect ourselves or to get things or to be someone or to have. And so then the whole cycle begins. So that if we follow the Buddha's advice and we reflect, this is the way nature works. I'm of the nature to age, nature to sicken, to die. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I'm the owner of my karma and so forth. Then the attitude changes in a radical way. Rather than it being experienced that something that was mine is being lost, it's recognized that there wasn't anybody here to own anything in the first place. How could anything really be owned? It's like, how can you own a cloud or a tree, or the moon? It's like, it's ridiculous. It's like, the moon is mine. What? Sometimes people have done that kind of thing, like when I think the story goes that when Cortez, the Spanish explorer, got to the Pacific Ocean, he sort of stood on the shore and said, "I claim this sea for Spain." So this little human being standing on a beach saying, "I claim the Pacific Ocean. This is mine." It's particularly ridiculous. This one little human being says, I am now the owner of the whole Pacific Ocean that covers a quarter of the surface of the planet. This is mine. Or this just belongs to my country. It can state that, but it's also somewhat ridiculous. So when we change that point of view, then it is a desert, like the desert of the real. It's a challenge. I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken. So it threatens the habits of self-view. But it's important to notice that the point of that reflection is that freedom of the heart that comes by, of course, how could it be otherwise? Duh. That's how nature operates. How could something be born that doesn't die? How can something begin and not end? It can't be. That's not the way nature works. And so that attunement to reality brings with it enormous relief. And so that the fear that is there in our little pod of self-view disappears. That there isn't that sense of needing to collect and protect and to own, and the feeling of threat, but rather there's an openness, there's an ease within us. Now, also another of the sayings is, I think it was Suzuki Roshi, who was a Zen teacher living in the States, founded the San Francisco Zen Center. Talking about this kind of area, he says, be very careful before you get on this train, because it doesn't stop. So once you're out of your little pod, you can't go back in. You might try, and I think probably many of us have, having had those kind of moments of realizing, this is all a bit pointless really. You know, just this sort of status and career and trying to be totally competent all of the time. It's all a bit silly. I mean, but once we've seen it, it's like learning to ride a bicycle. You can't really unsee it. You know, you can't unlearn how to ride a bicycle. Once you've learnt it's there in the system. So that once you've seen that, even if we might try to avoid that, then it's there within us. We might try to bury ourselves in getting busy, on being absorbed in worldly activity, but something in us is saying, you know, this is all a waste of time. Really. And so, again, I'm not reading anybody's mind, or I haven't been reading anybody's emails, or diaries or anything, but that there is something in us, the habits of self-view that say, "Oh, shut up! Don't say that." You know, I'm busy here. But it's in a way important to recognize that and to have compassion for that in us, which sort of wants to hide away, wants to sort of get back into the pod, was looking for the blue pill again to go back to sleep. But we prefer the delusion. Like this morning, I was recollecting because I lived in California for a long time, and they like to have bumper stickers there, little stickers they put on the back of the car. And a popular one in the San Francisco area was, "I've given up my search for truth, and am now looking for a good fantasy." Which is a joke, but not a joke. That something in us does want to switch off, and I wish I could just not feel. I wish I could just check out, and if I can just forget. And part of us would like to, but like Suzuki Roshi said, once you get on this train, so he would say, I think long and hard before you get on this train, because you won't be able to get off. So once you've taken the red pill, you can't untake it. But then I think we can recognize those feelings of regret or the urge to switch off, but also to recognize, part of me is regretting that, and part of me would like to go back to sleep. Like when you've woken up and you're having a really good dream, and you're kind of awake, but you're the dream hasn't quite finished yet, and the part of you is, I was enjoying that. If I could just sort of doze off again and go back to that dream, Probably a few of us have had that experience. I certainly have. I was enjoying that. Can I just go back and have a little bit more of that? Just a little bit more, just a teensy bit more of that. But it's important to listen to that, to respect that, but also to recognize that's not what you want to put in charge of your life, that we can do better than that. And to be able to recognize, what was that all about? Why was I getting so upset about that or so excited about that? Why did I make such a big thing of that for myself? Like, I was very impressed when my father was very old, and he and my mother were dog breeders. That's how they met. They were bull terrier breeders. And so my father eventually, they were farmers when myself and my sisters were born, and they had a lifelong interest in dogs. And then my father eventually had a career writing in a dog magazine and judging dog shows around the world, and he became a big figure. He was known as the Pope of bull terriers. Really, I'm not kidding you. He was a seriously big figure in the world of dog breeding. And so he was quite pleased with that. His calendar would be filled 3 or 4 years in advance. All dog shows he was invited to judge all around the planet, and he was treated with great respect in that field. But I was really amazed and impressed because he was one of the board members of the Kennel Club, which is the main sort of dog breeding organization for this country. But you have to retire from the board when you're 75. So that when he turned 75 and he stepped down from the board, then he said, everyone assumed that I'm no longer judging, I'm no longer writing, I'm no longer in the field. So I stopped getting all the invitations, I stopped getting all of the kind of contact, and it all just sort of fell away. And so he had this period between when he was 75, when he was 80, when he wasn't being called upon to travel around the world or be that figure anymore. And I remember at that time, the sort of denouement of his life was judging the best in show at Crufts, which in the dog breeding world, in the dog showing world, that's like arahantship. That's the sort of the consummation of human potential, is to judge the best in show at Crufts Dog Show. I'm not boasting. That's just within the dog world. That's the thing. But running up to that, he made this really wonderful comment one day. He said, "I'm a big fish, but it's really a very small pond." I thought, wow, good for you, Dad. Because 10 years before, there's no way he could ever have said that. But as his life was coming to an end, and also so many of his friends sort of dropping dead around him from cirrhosis of the liver, kidney disease, heart failure, lung cancer, and so on. So many of his contemporaries were sort of dropping like flies around him. So the heavenly messengers were really reaching him, and since the system wasn't really drawing him into that world in such a strong way, he had naturally got a bit of perspective, and the wisdom of his years really bore fruit. And I was really impressed that I'm a big fish, but it's a very small pond. And so that it was his last couple of years were very, very peaceful, very gracious in many ways, and that he wasn't sort of hanging on, trying to be still the Pope of bull terriers for till his last breath. He was happy to let that all. Okay, well, it's just. And even one day he even said, "It's only dogs, really." And I think I forget who else in the family was in the room, but I think there was a collective turning of heads, like. Dad just said, "What? It's only dogs." Yeah. So it's like us lot saying it's only Buddhism. I mean, so it was really wonderful to see that kind of perspective, that sense of letting go. Now, having said all of that, and the importance of waking up, taking the red pill, and not being afraid of the desert experience. I think it's important to recognize that that when you're ready to go into the desert, the point is that it's not just the desert experience, but that if one passes through that, if you let yourself feel that sense of loss or challenge to the self-view, then on the other side of that, as I said, those kind of reflections are challenging to the ego, but they're really freeing to the heart. So the point is that sense of the sense of relaxation and ease, the sort of safety on the other side of the desert, the security that one experiences on the other side of the desert. And also, I was reminded, thinking of these themes, how Luang Por Sumedho often used to quote from the Hermann Hesse novel "The Journey to the East," where the main protagonist of the story sets off with this group of people on the sort of spiritual journey to Asia, to the East, and they all go out in this pilgrimage together, and they're crossing this desert called Morbio Inferiore, which means the Valley of Despair. And while they're crossing the desert, the Morbio Inferiore, and this many of you will be familiar with Luang Por Sumedho talking on this theme, that the person who's telling the story loses heart, and he convinces himself these people are deluded, they don't know what they're doing, we're all going to die, that this is all a stupid idea. It's much better for me to go back to Europe, go back home. So he turns around and thinks that he's left the fools behind in the desert, and returns to his life and carries on with his world. So then, again, not wishing to spoil the story, but I will. So 30 or 40 years later, he comes across, by chance, the person who was leading the pilgrimage. He says, "Oh, it's you. Oh, I last saw you in the desert 30, 40 years ago. I thought you were all lost and that you were all wasting your time." And he said, No, it says, "It wasn't us who were wasting our time. We were making the journey. It was you who turned back. Yes, you're the one who got lost in the desert. Yeah, we were fine. You decided to believe your own self-centered perspective, and you turned back. So it was you that lost out. We made it through to the East and had our kind of spiritual fulfillment." So again, it's an interesting story, like The Matrix. I would recommend. It's got a lot of dharmic potential. The journey, Hermann Hesse's The Journey to the East, also has a lot of good themes in it, and so that when we are say ready to meet that desert experience and pass through it, then if we have the faith, the commitment, and also the Kalyana Mitta, if we are ready to be supported by our good spiritual friends, then at the other side of the desert we will find that quality of fulfillment and refreshment and true contentment, true ease, the happiness of not wanting anything, the happiness of not craving, the happiness of the heart that is independent of all circumstance. So that I would encourage us not to lose heart as we meet those desert experiences, the being abandoned by your loved ones, more aching joints than you realized you had in the body, more wrinkles than you thought were possible, more need to dye your hair, a couple of times a week instead of just once a month. Again, I'm not keeping track of anybody's. I don't have cameras in your bathroom cupboards or anything. But, just statistics, this is the way we operate. Just to not lose heart, but to say. Take the courage and to draw upon the support, offer support to our Kalyana Mitta, and then on the other side of the desert we find that quality of freedom, contentment, and fulfillment that is our potential. So I'll finish my reflections there, and we'll have a time for speaking of refreshment and contentment, some tea now, and then we'll reconvene at 20 past for some dialogue and questions. So please do settle yourselves down again. I always feel a bit sad to break up the party. People are having such a good time chatting with each other, but let's move things along. We have a microphone? Okay. So once everyone is settled and we're ready to begin, we have a wandering microphone, so I would request that people wait until the microphone reaches you, so then everyone can hear the question, and also the question will be recorded, so that makes it easier for the audio. So please, whatever would be useful to discuss. Don't be shy. Yes.
You mentioned the blue pill or the red pill, but isn't it better to take no pill?
Well, the Buddha was called the doctor of the world, and if we didn't need medicine, then life would be great. But this is where we're at, is that we're not blissfully happy and free all of the time. Unless I'm being too presumptuous. That was the starting point for the Buddha in his teaching. In fact, it's interesting that his first inclination was not even to try teaching at all, because he thought that humanity was beyond rescue. That was after his enlightenment, and seeing the depth of insight he'd had to develop, and the intensity of effort and struggle he'd had to make in his own spiritual training. And it said that after the enlightenment, he cast his vision around the world, and his first thought was that the beings of the world are so completely intoxicated, lost in their own bubbles. So they relish becoming. They only know becoming. Existence. They relish existence. They only know existence. They're addicted to becoming, to existence. But what they relish brings fear, and what they fear is pain. So he sort of looked around the world and thought, there's no point trying, because it's like one person who's not addicted seeing a billion who are. Where would you begin? So in the scriptures, it's wonderful, really, because it's recorded that his first inclination was there's no point trying. That it's an impossible task. So then, according to the story, then this Brahma called Sahampati picked up this thought through the airwaves, and then realized the world will be lost. The world will be utterly lost, because the mind of the newly awakened Tathagata is inclined towards not teaching. And as a Brahma, they're around for a lot of Buddhas. They live a long, long time. So Sahampati, I think, had seen quite a few Buddhas come and go. And thought, well, this newly awakened Buddha, this totally enlightened being, is inclined to not teach. So what can I do? So the Brahma Sahampati beamed down from the Brahma world and appeared in front of the Buddha and said, it's true that beings are lost. There are many, many beings who are caught up in delusion, but there are beings with a lot of dust in their eyes, and there are beings with a medium amount of dust in their eyes, and beings with just a very little bit of dust in their eyes. And so, for the sake of those with just a little dust in their eyes, please teach the Dhamma that you understand. So the Buddha then cast his vision around the world again and said, actually, this Brahma is correct. That there are some with sharp faculties and some with dull faculties, and so there's a few that will be able to understand. Okay, so we are the beneficiaries of that Brahma. Thank you very much. According to the mythology that intervened and caused the Buddha to teach, was a catalyst. So that when the Buddha started teaching, the Four Noble Truths is a medical diagnosis. So that experience of dukkha, of dissatisfaction, the fact that we're less than blissfully happy all of the time. In a way, it's based on the recognition of there is an ultimate reality, there is a Dhamma, there is a fundamental reality that underlies all things, that is the very fabric of all things. If there is this ultimate reality, why are we not happy all of the time? If that's the fabric of reality, why are we not blissfully happy? Why are we not free? How? How come? How is that? And so the Buddha started with the experience of dukkha. That's in like the symptom of the spiritual illness. Dukkha, not being happy, not being content, not being at ease. So dukkha literally means that which is hard to bear, or like the image is that a wheel that's not balanced on its axis, on its axle. And then the cause, so that the dukkha is the symptom, the cause of the illness is tanha, or self-centered craving. The prognosis, which is the third noble truth, is it's curable. It's the good news. And then the fourth truth, the Eightfold Path, that's the treatment. So it's a sort of fourfold medical diagnosis. So that's the framework for it. So and maybe the people who wrote the Matrix were knowledgeable about Buddhist Buddhist teachings, but the Eightfold Path is essentially the red pill. And if we didn't need the medicine, then we wouldn't take it. So any other thoughts, reflections, questions? These times are for you. You were having a great conversation before I rang the bell, so you don't have to go all sort of quiet and hushed. Yes, there's a hand at the back there. On the left-hand side.
An observation, really. I'm kind of getting on in years a bit. And as you say, you notice the extra wrinkles and aches and pains, and bits start falling off and one thing another. And, I've started to realize how persistent this sense of self is actually, and how resistant it is to almost anything. Buddhism is a mixture of kind of theory and practice, really, isn't it? In my experience of it, theory, it really does help, actually, but it can't, my experience of it, I struggle with just theory, and I think the practice is part of it as well. And I have noticed with mindfulness seems to be very, very good for this. And particularly, there's a phrase that Ajahn Amaro uses, is being the knowing. I know that some people don't like that as a phrase, but it's kind of mindfulness and kind of taking the self out of it in a sense, and just being a very kind of basic awareness. And it seems that the self finds it difficult to find a foothold in that. So I don't know, I'm interested in your comments on that.
Yeah, well, I would agree with all of that. The structure of the Buddhist path is often divided into three: the pariyatti, patipatti, and pativeda, which is the study, practice, and realization. So pariyatti is the study. So that's rather like you've got all the right medicines; they're sitting there in your medicine cabinet, but they don't really help you unless you actually take them. So the practice is taking the medicine. You can have the most perfect and appropriate medication in the world, but if you don't take it, it doesn't do you any good. It just sits there on your shelf, being correct. But on a practical level, it doesn't help at all. And then the realization is, having taken the medicine, that's the quality of well-being that is the result of having taken the medicine. So that, like I was saying, that the experience on the other side of the desert, when you make it through the morbio inferiore, it's that quality of well-being. But this would be spiritual well-being. In terms of the sense of self, I also find that phrases like being the knowing, or the way in which we can tease apart the quality of awareness and experience, or what Luang Por Sumedho would always use the word consciousness, or very often use the word consciousness, teasing that apart from personal characteristics, so that in this moment there's the experience of hearing my voice, there's the experience of choosing words, there's the experience of the weight of this body on the chair, the feeling of cloth on my skin, and put it all together, and it's a person. It's Ajahn Amaro, but in itself it's just feelings, tasting, smelling, touching, thinking, arising and passing away. There's a knowing of those different qualities. So that which knows gravity, that which knows texture, that which knows sound and meaning, is not gravity, it's not texture, it's not meaning, it's not a sense object, it's not a person. So that rather like those reflections on I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, using those sort of reflections to rejig the perspective. So to take a simple phrase like being the knowing, or I like to reflect on a phrase like the mind is not a person, or the mind is Dhamma. So we take our mind, our memories, our thoughts, our feelings, our moods, really personally. I'm angry, I'm inspired, I'm jealous, I'm fearful, I'm sleepy, I'm alert, I'm in pain, I'm comfortable at last. All those I ams. But if the attitude is tweaked, then the view can change so that those things are not created as personal. They're not put into the framework of I am, or I've got, or this is me or mine, but rather there's a flow of experience. And that which knows anger is not angry. That which knows agitation isn't agitated. That which knows happiness isn't happy. It's a bit more radical. But there's a quality of freedom that comes with that shift of attitude, when mind is not seen in a personal way. And the last book of Ajahn Sumedho's teachings is called Don't Take Your Life Personally. So when I saw that, I thought, all you need is the title. You don't really need any content in the pages. It's just the title says everything. Don't take your life personally. And it's a challenge, because we feel like, that's me in the mirror. These are my sensations. These are my aches and pains. These are my problems, my hopes, my achievements. And it really feels kind of crunchy. There's a lot of grain to it, a lot of weight to it, substance. But when that's explored, and just taking a little phrase like, don't take your life personally, it's kind of shocks the system. It's sort of, oh, how would you do that? Or, oh, is that an option? Oh. And exactly that, that's the shift of view. That's the changing of perspective. And the various ways that can be brought about, that breaking out of that prison of habit, challenging those habitual views and perceptions, that the more that the heart can really be free, the more that the sense of self is understood as as a natural psychological structure, but not something that has to be a limiting factor in this life, or this experience of being. That makes sense?
Yeah. There is just sort of in reply one little practical thing I've started doing. Actually, it's you've noticed how much we use I, me, and mine in conversation, actually, and in writing and things like that. It sort of runs through absolutely everything, and you can rephrase a lot of things, removing I, me, and mine from it, actually, which kind of, I think, helps a bit in a practical, very simple way to cut a reminder and to sort of shift our perspective a little bit.
It does. Also, notice how many times we use the word actually. No, I'm not getting at you personally, but it's how the mind is looking for the actual. This is the true perspective, and it'll grasp that and take refuge in an opinion or in a point of view, and that if there's an active wisdom, then it frees up even that kind of the way the mind defines things. Or, oh, now I've got it. Now I understand. It takes an idea and even takes hold of that. So it can be interesting just to flag a word like actually or personally, and that's put up a little flag every time that you find yourself saying that, and or using personal pronouns here. I think, you are, she is, he is. Just as you're describing, just to notice how often during the day we cast things into personal terms, but also that quality of defining. Like say, an interesting exercise to do, just to explore how much the mind creates the world. So I was quoting that passage about what is the world, that in the world whereby one is a perceiver of the world, a conceiver of the world, that is the world. So just to take something like colour, and to say, when you see a colour, like I say, well, I call this carpet blue. Now, is what is experienced here and is referred to as blue, is that the same as what other people see? Oh. And that the subjective nature of experience. So, I call this red, I call that blue. What do other people see? What do other beings see? What does a bumblebee see? What does a magpie see? What does a worm see? Does it have eyes? So that you're shaking up. Oh, it's blue. It's a blue carpet. I can see it. Of course, it's blue. So, to take that automatic judgment. So you can do that with color. Also, the meaning of words or sound. Like you hear a magpie. You think, well, that's meaningless. It's just a magpie calling. Well, to another magpie, that's a meaningful statement. To us, these words have meaning, hopefully. These sounds are called words, and they carry meaning. I say things, and people gathered here hopefully receive those sounds. They hear those sounds, and their meaning is replicated in the brain, in the mind. But to a magpie, these are not meaningful noises, I would say. That they, or to a bumblebee, it's just, to them, it's just a set of the vibrations by those big two-legged things. So that the ways of looking at our habits of perception and how we create the world and what we take to be real, to catch that and challenge it. It's if you try to do too much with this kind of exercise, it can get a bit confusing or just scrappy. But just to make a little project for a day, like just to say, take color or sound, or names. I call this person Joshua. I call this person Susan. I call this person Savitri. I call this, and what is that? I call myself Amaro. What is that? So that things that are automatic, the name associates with a particular person and the whole story, and just to make a little project during the course of a day or a few days, how much the mind creates the person from a name, and to catch that, stop it. What is that? What's that? What's that name referring to? Really, completely. So that, and you can make up your own exercises. You can be imaginative. But I've done this kind of practice a lot in the past, and it's really, actually, revealing how much and continually the mind creates the world out of habit, and the judgments that are made are so automatic. It's kind of frightening how so vigorously and continuously the mind creates the world, and just taking a moment to stop and say things like color or time, name, meaning, number, all these things that seem automatic and obviously real to us. Well, we say 1, 2, 3. Well, 1 what? 2 what's? 3 what's? What 3? When we say 3, what is 3? it's a sound. Well, it's referring to the number 3, between 2 and 4. 3. Well, 3 watts. And so part of our mind is going, well, that's a stupid thing to do. But part of us is going, oh yeah. Oh. We create number, we create time, we create meaning. And it's our conditioning is so strong, we don't realize that we do that. But we just apply that reflective attitude and explore that. Even if it's just for a second or half a second, something in the mind opens up and goes, oh right, that's fabricated, that's constructed, that's conditioned, it's formed. Oh. And in that, oh, there's the intimation, the intuition of the unborn, the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unformed. So, is that a hand going up or somebody scratching their head? No, it's a scratching a head. Yes, at the front there. Dill.
Bhante, I'll be very grateful. I think I heard you saying in this talk, when you quoted the Upanishads and about mythology and how there was this unmanifested, and then suddenly this awareness of I am, and when there was an other and fear and craving and the rest. But I've also heard people who are Vedanta practicing now, especially say that actually when they say I am that I am, they are referring to the Anidasana, the unfathomable, the unboundless, unconditioned, whatever. So is it that people do use it in that particular tradition, like how we talk about the unconditioned, or is it the thing that when you say I am, you're really referring to the personality view, the Sakkaya Ditthi?
Well, it's a good question. It's like many religious teachings are used in completely different ways by different traditions. Sometimes they're used in completely different ways by the same person. So you always have to listen for the context in which something is said. So that in Buddha Dhamma, I am is a conceiving. It's called manyati is the Pali word. So the Buddha says, I am is a conceiving. Conceiving is a disease. It's a tumor. It's a poisoned arrow. It's an affliction. So that definitely bad stuff. Yeah? That conceiving, and so that's the framework for that within the Pali teachings is that the I am is a kind of a symptom of that attitude of mind that creates a separate I, distinct and apart from everything else. So in some of the Vedantic traditions, say like Advaita Vedanta, then or you got a great teacher like Sri Ramana Maharshi, then they take the I am as a synonym for the unconditioned. You know, I am that. You know, tat, ahang tat, I am that. And so then that is completely the opposite, whereby it's sort of the I am is taken in a completely non-personal way, and is referring to a non-conceiving. In a way saying, so that I would say in Vedanta, the use of a phrase like I am that is exactly the same as I would say chitta is the mind is Dhamma, or chitta is Dhamma. I say it's the same meaning. But the language is used in different ways. So, and different teachers of different scriptures, they will often have their own unique usage, like the way Luang Por Sumedho uses the word consciousness. So that's very different. And I don't know how many times I've had to answer questions like, well, I was reading this book of Ajahn Sumedho's, and he's talking about consciousness. It doesn't seem to really fit into the 5 khandhas. And, yeah. So he pretty much always, uses the word consciousness to refer to awakened awareness. But most other Buddhist teachers don't. So you have to, this is Luang Por Sumedho speaking. Therefore, the word consciousness carries a different meaning than if it's a Pali dictionary or something. So that you need to take the context into account. And so then, but also with hearing any teaching or reading any Dhamma book or text, that's an important part of it, is to reflect, okay, what's the background of this? What's the context? Who is speaking here? and then to the degree possible, to measure what's being read or what's heard against your own experience, so that you're considering, well, what's that talking about? When Ajahn Amaro uses the word consciousness like that, if he says something like consciousness is unconditioned, then, okay, now, if he says consciousness is unconditioned, he can't be talking about the vijnana that's there of in like form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness in the 5 aggregates. It must be something else. So, listening to what he's saying, what in my experience matches the quality that he's talking about, and then you're using your own experience as the baseline, and then measuring the teachings of what you hear against that personal experience. And so if you do that, rather than creating a conceptual model, you're using your experience as the baseline or the measure. So what's going to happen is that every so often you're going to run into mystery. You go, well, I don't know what that's referring to. I have no idea what that's about. And then rather than filling up the mystery with an idea or a belief or an opinion or an anxiety, it's much more helpful to just let that be open, to let that be unknown. Say, well, that's something, I'm not sure what that's referring to. I don't really know how that works, or I don't really know what I'm feeling. This is weird. I don't know what this is, or how this works. And just the skillful thing is to leave it open, and then just to use the practice to explore those particular experiences. And the way I found it working is that if there's some particular term or a teaching that, what is that about? How does that work? Sometimes it can be 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years, that it just sort of hovers around. And then often you hear something spoken, a different phrase is used, or it's in a different context than what you're used to. And then, oh, maybe that's it. There's you've suddenly seen it from a different angle. You've picked it up and seen it from the other side. And that makes sense. So that you're not just creating a conceptual map and carrying your map around, but you're really applying the teachings to how things are experienced, and then seeing what really brings about that ending of dukkha, that brings about that quality of well-being and freedom that comes with that. Any questions from this side? My right-hand team are very quiet over here. They're beyond doubt, right? Yes.
A question from myself and my wife.
I thought you were going to say question from my cell phone.
Yeah. To give you some context, we've experienced some growth in our careers recently, successful growth, which we think is a positive thing. However, in our careers, whilst we try and balance this along with the relationship we have with each other, our friends and family, we also want to remain healthy. We just want to know how we can do that without, as you say, taking the blue pill and adopting that autopilot mode, and reading or seeing standards set by others, be it social media, for instance.
Well, that's a good question. Success and failure are tricky blighters because our society is very success-oriented. Success is an absolute good. Failure is an absolute bad, quote unquote. And so that the more that your business profits, the more likes you get on your Facebook page, the more Instagram followers you have, good. The more your business tanks, the more that you're unfriended, then, and so on, then bad. This is sweeping statements, but so that the conditioning that we have is towards a strong investment in success and failure, and it makes it very personal. I've succeeded. I'm doing well. We're a good. We're a successful team. I've failed. I've got it wrong. I'm being criticized. I'm a bad person. So the whole way that the mind relates to success and failure and how it personalizes things is really useful to look at. And so I talk about this a lot because of the amount of suffering created in this area. So the Buddha was very practical, and he encouraged people to work diligently and to do as well as they can in their family lives, their business life, whether they're merchants or farmers or political leaders or whatever, or in monastic life, so that he was very comprehensive in the advice that he gave. But particularly the more that our efforts can be guided by mindfulness and wisdom rather than self-centered drive, the better. So that in order to succeed at anything, the Buddha laid out these 4 criteria. The first 3 all work together. So this is called the 4 bases of success. So the first one is interest, chanda, or interest or zeal or desire. You have to be interested to do something, to engage. Its other partners are virya. You have to be energetic. You've got to not just be interested, you've got to get up and do something. And then the third element is citta, which in this respect means thinking about what it is that you want to do. You want to start a new company? Okay, you better get off the sofa, and, or at least pick up your phone and start making some calls. So there needs to be interest, energy, and then reflection, thinking things through. Okay, how do we want to do this? What do we want to do? Why do we want to do it? How's it going to work? So those 3 all work together. And then the 4th element is what's called vimamsa, or reviewing. Okay, having been interested, having applied energy, having thought through what we're doing and how we're doing it, what's been the result? Is it working? Is it not working? So there doesn't have to be any intense ego involvement in any of that. That's just seeing a need. Say that maybe there's a need for reliable car tires. There's a need for faster broadband. There's a need for healthy fruit juices being available in eco-friendly packaging. And so that you're recognizing a need, you're working hard to provide it and thinking things through in a good way. And then, did it work? Did anybody buy our tires? Did anybody put some effort into helping us to develop the faster broadband? Did somebody help us to... did we succeed in marketing this fruit juice in an eco-friendly packaging? Did it work? Is it successful? And then by looking at the results of what you do, then you learn from that. What works and is beneficial and it brings good results, then you sustain that, maintain that. What it doesn't work, or it's harmful, it has unforeseen negative consequences, okay, well, we learn from that. And again, whether something is successful and it's beneficial, rather than, hooray, we've really made it, we're great, look at us, we're fantastic, look at all the money we've made, or look how famous we are. Rather, well, this seems to be helpful, okay, this looks like a good direction, let's keep heading this way and see what happens. Or if it all tanks and you lose a lot of money, or that there's all kinds of negative consequences, think, okay, well, that's a lesson learned. Okay, that didn't work. We've got a big debt to pay off. Okay, what do we learn from that? Again, rather than building it into an ego-based project. Oh, we're failed. What will people think? This is a disaster. I'm a hopeless person. I've ruined my career or my relationships on the rocks because my partner can't respect me because I'm a failure. All those kind of projections. Like, we don't have to do that at all. We can recognize, well, that was a mistake. And this is not just within the business world. This happens in monastic life too. That you can make good judgments and be praised for it, make bad judgments and be criticized. Quite reasonably. You make a choice, it has a result, and you realize, oh, that was a big mistake. Why did we do that? And you can't undo it, but you realize, okay, well, that's really painful. That really didn't work. That was a really bad mistake. Okay, well, we can't turn the clock back, but what do we learn from that? So we can make it into, I'm a terrible person. What will they think of me? This is a real disaster. My life is ruined. We can think that way, or not. So also the last element that I often talk about in terms of success and failure is another little interesting exercise to do, I would say. Interesting is another word to flag, by the way. Actually. That if you think back, say 5 or 10 years, to something that you were really pleased about, you got your degree, or you got the contract, you had the success experience, everything worked out really perfectly, and at the time you thought, great, this is fantastic, at last I got what I wanted. And then 5 years later or 10 years later, you look back and you realize, I can't believe I was celebrating. Little did I realize what was coming. It seemed like such a good idea at the time. What was I thinking? How could I not have seen what that was going to turn into? And so that what was a genuine success that maybe you were praised for or was something very positive, it became the cause for something really painful and difficult. Similarly, again, look back 5 or 10 years, and something that was a disaster, an illness or a collapse of your business or a relationship or a death in the family, and at the time you would never have chosen it. It's a disaster, it's awful, it's bad, it was unbearable at the time. But when you look back at it, you realize, well, it was horrible, but that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Darn it. So, what does that say about success and failure? What does that say about things going badly or things going well? What it does, if we're wise, is that it says, if there's a success, don't get drunk on it, and don't assume that it's an absolute good. It's just, this looks like it's heading in a good direction. Let's learn from that and see where it goes. And when things are painful or difficult or challenging or go badly, okay, this is exactly what I didn't want to happen. Right. Okay. So what do we do with this? How do we learn from this? And then both success and failure become a source of benefit, and that liking and disliking are recognized to be of equal value. So that in terms of your work, your career, and so forth, then if you make your happiness dependent on how many Facebook followers, Facebook likes you get, or how much investment gets made in your company, you will suffer. I'm not a prophet, but that's the way that it works. Is it? Because when things go up, your mood will rise up, but when things go down, then your heart will break. That's just physics. If you tie your heart to those changes, then as they change, then the heart rises and falls. So if you shift the attitude so that you're working with application, with interest, with commitment, but you don't tie your happiness to the results, but rather you tie your happiness to the good intention and also the attunement of what you're doing with the natural field of life around you. What's benefiting you? Because if you're building a fantastic business, but you and your wife are driving each other crazy in the process, you're saving the world, but you're driving each other nuts, it's not going to work. It's not going to last. So the joy or the satisfaction comes not just from the bottom line, the profit margin, but it comes from the well-being within yourself and around. So in Bhutan, they developed this different concept called the gross national happiness, which I think is Bhutan is a very small Himalayan nation, but it's interesting. Even so, G8 countries have had Bhutanese members of the cabinet coming to advise them, because I feel it's obviously I'm a bit biased, but I feel it's an extremely skillful approach, that you're not just looking at profit margins, but you're looking at well-being as the measure, and more companies and societies are shifting to see things in that way.
Thank you very much.
Okay, one last question. If you can wait for the microphone. It's just on 4 o'clock, so we'll call this the last one. I'm not good at short answers. So.
Thank you. My question isn't fully formed yet, but I'm just going to say a few things, and maybe there's a few questions in there. I've been quite inspired by the teachings, particularly in April, and it came up that I had an opportunity to possibly go to Lumbini and do a 2-month retreat, which is something which I've wanted to do. Just because of circumstances in my work was some training opportunities fell through, so it was fine. I mean, I had some space to do it. My daughter's gone to university, and my girlfriend's given her blessing to it. So I was like, okay, I can do this, and yeah. So I'm in the process of trying to make that happen and do the things that I need to do, like a sabbatical, and make it happen. But yeah, it's just a few doubts kind of come in as well. Just because I think, although my girlfriend's given her blessing, she's kind of got a different attitude towards Buddhism than me, and it feels that the more that I kind of deepen in my path, the more sometimes it seems like she's going off on a different path. So it makes me wonder about what that will mean for our relationship. As I suppose I have this idea that I'm going to do a 2-month retreat, and it's going to be quite significant. It's going to change me. And then also, although my daughter's gone to university, it's her second week, it's turning out that she's not too happy at the moment at university, so I'm thinking, oh, maybe I won't be around for a couple of months. You know, what's she going to be like? You know, so it's just about that, really. It feels like quite an important decision to go away for 2 months, and with the intention of really deepening in my practice and really kind of like refining and zeroing in. Obviously, I want to make the most of that. I just wondered if you just had some words of wisdom for me regarding that decision and the process and undertaking.
Well, I never make people's decisions for them.
No.
But as a policy, so don't take it personally, but I never do that. But in terms of decision making based on wisdom and attunement rather than on idealism or obligation, then what's most helpful is to take some time in meditation to sit, let your mind go as quiet as possible, and just ask yourself, with all preconceptions and biases laid aside to the degree that they can be laid aside, and then just as the mind is quiet as possible, just invite that question in. Yeah. Will it be, and you can phrase it for yourself, but some phrasing like, will it be for the greatest benefit if I go to do a 2-month retreat in Nepal? That's it, just simple as, the simpler the better. Will it be for the greatest benefit if I do this? And then just see what arises. Because oftentimes our heads are so filled with shoulds and shouldn'ts and lists of pros and cons. There's so much verbiage in there. We can't tell what we really feel, because what will they think, and what I should do, and what I said I would, and I've always felt this, but I want to do that, and the mind can be so filled with just chatter. And really heartfelt questions that we've been maybe living with for years. It's such a blur of mental creation around it that we can't discern our own intuition. And it's interesting how sometimes just giving ourselves the space to nothing else, it's not in the middle of anything else, to just give ourselves the opportunity to ask a question, say, what's really important to me here? What do I really feel about this relationship? What's the most important thing? And just to keep it really simple, just let the mind be as quiet as possible, just drop that in. And this works for all kinds of areas of life. Just drop that in and see what arises. And sometimes it can be surprising how immediate the response is, like, duh, of course you should do A, or be, or it can be the opposite. It can be the reason why you're confused or you can't decide is because this is undecidable. You can't know. There's too many variables. That's why you can't decide. There's too many unknowns here. And even that can be quite a relief. Like, oh, I was trying to think my way to a solution, but it's an equation with 150 variables. It's not possible. So, just that simple process, using the meditation to draw upon your own wisdom, so you can think of it as consulting your own oracle. The oracle of wisdom is right inside you. And to let that question just be formed and see what arises.
And keep returning to that. Perhaps because I think I have done that, and there's been times when it's very clear to me, and then something changes. Something might happen, or somebody might say something. My girlfriend might say, "Oh, it's 2 months. It's a long time," or something like that, and then I'll be like, "Oh, is she going to be okay?"
Well, that's my advice.
Yeah, no.
That's the package that's offered. So. Okay, so that's the end of the Sunday talks for 2017. Thank you all for your good attention and good questions, and may you be well. I'm sure our paths will cross, well, I suspect our paths will cross between now and July of 2018, but go well in the meantime.